So, in this episode, as the title indicates, we're going to be looking at the question: did Leia know Luke was a Force projection? Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, recapping, so to speak, because, as you know, this interlude happened nearly at the end, literally 20 minutes before the end of the movie. So I'm not going to recap the whole movie to explain how we got to this point. If you were intrigued by the question, you obviously know how we got here. So Luke has been on Octo for years and years and years. He finally gets into the fray to save his compatriots, and he appears mysteriously at the end and decides he will serve, I guess you would call it, a distraction while his compatriots escape. Shortly after he appears, however, he does have a very brief conversation with Leia before he goes into the battlefield to mix it up with, so to speak, with Kylo Ren. And that conversation is very touching. And of course, when you first saw it, when he first appears, I'm sure you were quite sort of intrigued by him appearing at this time. Some people would have said, oh yeah, he looks different. He looks younger, that doesn't make sense. And other people have said, no, he just looks cleaned up or whatever. I think the vast majority of viewers wouldn't have thought much of his appearance or anything weird, except the fact that it was a little curious how he could show up there when they said there was no other entrance and all that kind of stuff. But he was talking like Luke Skywalker and had all the appearances of Luke Skywalker. Of course, up to this point in our history of film watching, we weren't familiar with the notion of Force projection. So obviously that would not occur to us right off the bat that something like that was being deployed. Perhaps later, if you were watching closely, they did drop little clues that something unconventional was going on. But as I said, to the typical viewer, even a viewer, well versed with the movies, I don't think anyone would have seen the idea of Force projection coming. That said, we later learned that he was a Force projection. Now, having said that, when you saw the actual conversation between Leia and Luke, well, I'll just speak for myself. No, I wasn't thinking that it was a Force projection. I didn't quite understand how he got there, but I was able to look beyond that. Just like a lot of movie things, you would say, well, don't quite understand how he got there, but he's there. I'll just give it a pass. And then they was talking. He went onto the battlefield. It was only later that you said, oh, it's a Force projection. But while you were watching it, you weren't thinking there was a Force projection. So you weren't trying to break down, the idea of him being a Force projection. Now, fast forward, you've seen the movie, you know he's a Force projection. Now you think back, oh, wait a minute. So if he was a Force projection when he was talking to Leia, did she know did she know he was a Force projection, or do you think she knew she was a Force projection? So watching it a second time, that was one of the things I was looking for when I saw it a second time. Did she really let on, perhaps by her body language, that she knew? We want to get more insight into that. And of course, since now I have a Blu-ray, so I can watch it many, many times and really analyze their encounter. But that said, we're going to dissect that scene very, very tediously and look at everything and go from there. All right, so strap in and get ready for my presentation today. All right, so the first thing I want to do to set the foundation, it's appropriate that I really just described the whole scene. The scene wasn't that long. It was only like 2 minutes. So the first thing I'm going to do is just present that encounter line by line, word by word, because really that's what we're analyzing in context of other things, but that's really a central part of our analysis. So let me, in essence, reenact that conversation between Leia and Luke. Luke walks into the back of this fortress, this camp, this mine. Has the bright light shining behind him. Where that light is coming from, totally not clear. There's obviously not a window into the outside, but I guess that's a moot point. That's 2 hours and 7 minutes into the movie. The movie lasts about 2 hours and 30 minutes and some change, so we're clearly near the end of the movie. Leia sits down, Luke sits down, and Leia starts the conversation. So at that point, Luke lays an open palm over Leia's open hand, and their hands are clearly touching with a slight grasp. More about that later. Then they cut away briefly because Leia looks at Luke. Then they cut back, and it shows Luke taking his hand away, leaving the dice. And if you look closely, you'll see that their hands were clearly grasping. More about that later. And then there's the dice there. Then they cut away, and at that point, Luke stands up, and then he grasps Leia on both sides of her head, basically cups it, and then he kisses her on the forehead. Then he gets up, starts walking away. He's passing the C-3PO, and C-3PO says, "Master Luke," and Luke winks, and that's when he enters out onto the battlefield. Now that encounter, to that point, that's 2 hours, 9 minutes, 33 seconds. So that whole encounter lasted a little over 2 minutes. Okay. Now, that's our foundation. Now, just as part of my due diligence in researching the question, because you guys know by now, I like to be thorough as much as possible. I just don't throw this thing together and I just don't wake up and start ranting about stuff. I I think, I like to say, I like to believe, put together pretty logical, sensible presentation. So as part of my due diligence, I have the Blu-ray. I want to get listen to Ryan Johnson's audio commentary about the scene, because obviously if he's saying over top the scene, oh yeah, and Leia knew, and so now they was obviously knew about it, and blah blah blah, then that just shoots the question out the water. That makes the question moot, because he's already answered it, at least in his mind. So our conjecture here is immaterial. It's already been answered. So I did feel a need to go back and see what he says about it, whether he answers the question. So I listened to his commentary, and long story short, he doesn't address that question. Does talk about the scene. Boy, he doesn't answer the question. So it leaves it still up for I guess I'll say debate. Well, he does tell us his thoughts on force projection and give us a little insight into what he feels the quote-unquote rules are when it comes to force projection. And that's going to be important in our analysis, because once we understand his definition of force projecting and the rules, so to speak, of force projecting, then we can be in a better position to understand just how someone who's force projecting interacts with the environment, with other people, and what they can do or can't do, and that's going to be very important to our analysis. So let me just go through some of the comments that he said about force projection. His first comment is not necessarily about the force projection, but his comments about this touching scene, and I'm going to quote him. So let me quote what he says. The moment at the end where Mark stands up and kisses her forehead is something he came up with during rehearsals. He just said, I feel like I wanted to do this. I'm so happy he did that. So that's what his sort of overview of at least the end of the scene was. Now let's go into what he says about force projecting. And I'm pretty much quoting from what he said. To play the whole thing with Luke coming back as this kind of projection. So if you watch it through and you listen to the sound, you'll notice that we took out all of the footsteps and all of the interaction of Luke. He doesn't make any noise when he interacts with anything. If you look at the shot where he puts the dice in Leia's hand, you can see that he doesn't actually interact with the hand, and actually he kind of just puts his hand over and takes it away, and the dice are there. Editor's note, that's not quite accurate. We'll talk about that later. We were very careful, even to the point of having ILM, we know who they are, Industrial Light and Magic. ILM erased footsteps or dust he was kicking up. We try to play as fair as possible in terms of him not actually being there. So that's what he said right around that scene. Now, later on, I'm going to fast forward to when he's with Kylo Ren. In other words, he doesn't say anything more about force projection until a little later when he encounters Kylo Ren out in the battlefield. And these are his comments. The salts are sparking off Kylo's blade, but not Luke's. And the salt flakes never stick to Luke. Again, I was just trying to play fair a little bit. Okay, fast forward to the next comment about, force projection related information. There's going to be a moment, Luke's foot, where he goes over the salt and it doesn't move the salt. Again, I was just trying to play fair. Okay, so that said, that's some very helpful information. I mean, other people viewers have commented on what it seemed like the rules were, and we've commented accordingly. But now you hear it from the formulator of the rules for the force projection in the film, and so now we have sort of a frame of reference to understand whether, number one, whether all the rules applied, or how certain things could happen if those are in fact the rules. Okay, so now we have really two critical foundations. We have the scene that happened, that we saw, and we have Rian Johnson's analysis of force projection. So let's get into analysis. So if you've seen any of my other videos, I like to do this in a very methodical way. I'm just not popping up and popping off about stuff. I really take a lot of time. You wouldn't believe how much time I spent analyzing this, and the timestamps and the quotes and stuff. At any rate, that's not your concern. Suffice to say, I like to do things very methodically. And if you've seen other videos, I like to present an idea and present evidence or arguments, and then kind of either come up with a conclusion or invite you to come up with a conclusion. In this particular case, I'm actually going to give you my opinion, and I'm going to give you my exhibits backing up my conclusion. So let me say right off the bat, I'm not going to leave it to the end. I'm going to say right off the bat, I believe Leia knew that Luke was a force projection. It's not said in the movie, of course, but to me, I think it's pretty clear. And if we follow all the logic, if we follow all the rules of force projecting, as from what we saw, not only from what we saw, but according to the rules laid out by Rian Johnson, if you put that all together, along with other things, I think it's pretty incontrovertible that not only did Leia know that Luke was a force projection, but also that Luke knew that Leia knew that he was a force projection. Got that? So let me give you my exhibits to support my argument, my contention. Okay? Exhibit number one. Now, the first one is just common sense and logic. In other words, how did he, from Leia's point of view, and she sees Luke there in the corner coming out of the shadows, literally. Leia has to say to herself, wait a minute, how did he get into here? We've already analyzed this place, and there's no back door, there's no place for him to come from in the back. How could he possibly, how did he get here? That's too mysterious. That doesn't make sense how he could do that. That sort of tips something off that something wasn't right, especially Luke Skywalker. I mean, did he come in a craft? We didn't hear about any craft. Nothing showed up on our little radars, and we do have little mini old ass radars. We should have been able to pick him up coming. There's no exit. Common sense would dictate that you would say, this is weird, this is not logical. Luke Skywalker has the Force, he's a master, he's very crafty. So I'm not quite sure. Doesn't seem right in some way. Of course, Leia would have no knowledge of Force projection. No more than we have any knowledge of Force projection, frankly. So I think that should have been an immediate tip-off that something wasn't right. The fact of the matter is that, okay, so the Force does not make you super intelligent or anything like that, at least not that we know of. But at the same time, it doesn't make you super stupid either. And so therefore, just common sense would create a lot of suspicion on how Luke Skywalker would appear out of nowhere in a place where there's literally no known entrance or exit except for the front door, which he clearly didn't come through. So that's exhibit number one. Exhibit number two. Force sensitivity. Now, at this point in the whole franchise, Luke and Leia are the most genetically related Force holders still alive. They're that close. Now, I know some of you are going to say, well, no, hold on now. Kylo Ren, that's Leia's son, so they got strong genes. That's mother-son genes. That's as strong. No, not quite. No, not quite. Because Luke and Leia, you could argue, sort of have half Force genes, and then when Leia, was involved with Han Solo, their child has even less Force genes. If I'm calling them genes, but let's get beyond that. That's a whole nother argument about genes. But you understand what I'm saying. The fact that Kylo Ren has Leia and Han Solo as parents, for whatever importance genes are, Kylo Ren should have less of them. You get the point. Luke and Leia are more genetically connected with the Force of anybody we still know of. Their Force connection is historic, infamous, all throughout the entire series. And it stands to reason that she could detect that this guy in front of her was not actually there. You won't call it force instincts or something of that nature, go ahead. You know what I'm saying? They have communicated for years and years and years. Their lines of communication are very strong. It just stands to reason that with the guy literally right there, their knees are probably almost touching, they're that close, that she could detect that this was some type of projection. We know from the Mary Poppins scene, I don't have to explain what that scene was. Actually, I made a video about it. I hope that it's appeared by now. It may not, because I've filmed all these videos quite some time ago before you're seeing this. But I think everyone knows what the Mary Poppins scene is. And in that scene, we're actually, we're under the impression that there was a lot of force instincts that kicked in with that led her to survive the bomb blast on the bridge. So obviously, as evidenced, her force instincts are extremely advanced. So you would think those instincts were advanced enough to be able to detect whether the Luke in front of her was real or not real. We know that the force sensitivity works over great distances. She was feeling stuff with Luke even from Octo. Now, as evidenced in the final scenes when Luke died, she had like a little emotional reaction, right? So obviously, and so did Rey, I believe. So obviously, that force sensitivity carried over, could reach to Octo. That's fact, because they showed that. So that's hard fact. So we know that the sensitivity can reach Octo, and you would just think logically that she can tell whether the force is coming off from him from right in front of her or coming from Octo. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like your cell phone. If she had her force sensitivity meter on a cell phone, you would think that with Luke right there, it would be like at 5 bars, right? Because he's like literally, you could reach out. But as far as him being on Octo, it's maybe like half a bar, right? You get what I'm saying? So you would just think through force sensitivity that she could detect that the sensitivity that she's picking up isn't consistent with her brother being right there, arm length away. Also, along with this argument, we know that they can employ mind control. We've seen Luke employ mind control, going back to, I believe that was Return of the Jedi with the guards. I think that was at Jabba's place. He made them do other things. We've seen Rey do it, made guards do other things. So we've seen Kylo Ren get into Poe Dameron's mind. We've seen Kylo Ren get into Rey's mind and vice versa. So the Jedi mind control, for lack of a better word, does allow a person to go deep into another person's mind and extract information, if you will, or see everything that's going on. And you would think that with them right there in front of each other, that they could pick up just sensitively or telepathically, reach into each other's mind and answer that question and make it very clear that no, obviously I'm a force projection, and excuse me, excuse my appearance, blah blah blah, and they're just communicating on a whole nother level beyond what we're actually seeing and hearing, right? Okay, Exhibit 3. Leia's expression on her face. I kind of alluded to it earlier. When she first sees Luke, she's just pretty much, oh, what? She doesn't say anything, actually. She's not like, now granted, she's not a bubbly lady in this film. She's always very prestigious and ladylike. No, she's not bubbly at all. Very careful in her movements and all that type of stuff. But it just seemed like she was a little unusually subdued to see the brother she hasn't seen in 10 million years here for the first time. You would have thought she'd be Luke, what are you doing here? How'd you get in here? Oh my God, how are you okay? I mean, who's with you? Blah blah blah. None of that. No questions. No, not one. She didn't ask one question about how he got there. You don't find that unusual? But again, going back to expression on her face, I wrote down some adjectives on how I would describe her, her facial expressions and her demeanor. Coy, aloof, sedate, pensive, subdued, poignant, touching, resigned. All in all, it just didn't seem like someone who was thinking, oh, this is my brother that I haven't seen in years and years. She just seemed to have a demeanor that said, wow, you came. This is so special that you elected to present yourself to me at this critical moment. I understand everything that's going on. It's special that you want to give me some final message. This is special that we're having some closure. I get it. Your force projection. We're beyond that. We don't got to talk about it. I get it. And this is so nice of you that you made the time. That you felt it was necessary. That's the demeanor that she was giving off to me. That's my impression looking at her body language and her facial expressions. Okay, exhibit number 4. Now we're just going to get into the technical aspects of it. Basically, taking into account what Rian Johnson has said about force projections, etc. Now, so according to Rian Johnson, and pretty much from what we saw, well, we can't really see all this, but according to his rules now, the force projection has absolutely no physical or tangible interaction with the real world. Now, I'm not quoting him, but that's the upshot of what he said. And so it's basically an apparition, really, in the purest sense of the word, right? So essentially, it has no smell, no sound, no weight, no footprint. You can't touch it. If you were to reach out and try to touch it, you would just feel air. It has no substance, no material. It's not matter. It's just it's literally not. It's literally not there. You cannot touch a force projection. It has no weight. None of that. So if we obey this same logic, if we obey this same rule, if you cannot touch a force projection because it has literally no matter, no weight, no nothing, then a force projection cannot touch you. You cannot feel the touch of a force projection because it leaves no imprint. It cannot imprint upon your skin or your body. It carries no force with it, no physical force with it. So it cannot touch you or any of that. Or its touch, it can touch you it can touch you as a force projection, but it can't be felt. More critically, it can't be felt. You follow me? So let's go back to Leia's encounter with Luke. So there's no sound when he sits. When he's sitting down, his garments aren't ruffling or anything, or making any sound of ruffling or rustling. He's not giving off any kind of odor or scent. His body is not giving off any warmth or heat or anything like that. He's not emitting any breath that you could smell or just feel the air of breath coming out of his mouth. Now, mind you, they're literally arm's length away. It's not like, but he was across the room. No, he's right there in front of you. So you should be able to detect this. And if you just sit down with anybody, your best friend, your child, your whoever, they give off a lot of these things that it's just undeniable. So you would, and you're not really doing a checklist in your mind when you meet somebody and you're with them about all these different elements, but your subconscious detects all these things. In fact, when you are attracted to someone, your body is actually going subconsciously through these little checklists. When you're attracted to someone, your subconscious is picking up on their scent and their breath and their warmth and their pupils, whether they're dilated or not. All these little things your subconscious is picking up with it behind the scenes, telling you, how you feel about them. So Leia, being very perceptive and having, advanced force perception, if you want to call it that, she should be able to pick up on the fact that all these things are not present with this projection, and know that this ain't real. This is not possible as someone in the flesh. So that would be sort of the technical argument. Now let's get to Exhibit 5, and this is very important. This is really the game changer, the deal breaker with this whole thing. In this encounter that Luke and Leia had, in the end, there were 3 points of contact where they actually seemingly made physical contact. Now, the first one is with the dice. Now, what we see on the screen is Luke put his hand up. He brings his hand into Leia's hand. They actually touch. There's no doubt about that. Rian Johnson says, no, they weren't touching. He just had his hand over her hand, blah, blah, blah. No, you look and watch for yourself. They was clearly, unequivocally touching. And then he takes his hand away, and again, you can see in that scene, there was clearly touching. There's no doubt about that. And then the dice are there. So if a projection has no touch, Leia obviously said, wait a minute, we were holding hands, he was touching me, and I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel not one thing. I did not feel anything from him holding my hand. I clearly saw his hand there. He's like a ghost. He's literally not there. He's not real. That's game over. That answers the question right there. Second point of contact. The dice. He left the dice in her hand. We later find out, though it's obvious in this context, that these are force projected dice. The dice have no weight. They have no substance. You can't grab them. They're not material. They have no weight. So they're laying in her hand. She can't feel them at all because they're force projected dice. So they're not leaving any kind of pressure or weight in her hand. So she's saying, I'm holding what looks to be dice, but they're literally not, I can't feel them at all. That is the second major tip-off that these aren't real dice handed to me by a figure that's not there either, that appeared to have touched me, but I didn't feel nothing. So these are all some type of hologram or mind trick or something. I can't really explain it because I've never heard of force projections and stuff like that, but this is clearly just some type of apparition, some force created. I presume it has to be through the force, some force apparition created right now. That should have been the second tip-off. And then the third tip-off is when he stood up. I mean, it's almost like he's saying, look, I've been sort of, by the force, I've been communicating to you that I'm a force projection. I've touched your hand. I've left the projected dice in your hand. It should be obvious to you by now. I'm a force projection. It should be obvious. I think I made it pretty clear, or I'm sure you can tell, and we've sort of conveyed it through force sensitivity. But if there's any doubt whatsoever in your mind, as I get up to leave, I'm not going to leave any doubt in your mind. I'm going to get up, I'm going to cup your head with my both two hands, I'm going to kiss you on your forehead, and just nail it down. Because obviously, she could not feel any of that. She didn't feel the kiss on her head. She didn't feel the hands on the side of her face or any of that. That game over. Game over. With that, it's obvious that this guy's not real. There's no way around that. There's no way she could feel that if you follow all the logic. And I listen, I listen very carefully. If it's not going to leave footprints because it has no weight, it has no matter, then you can't touch it. You can't put a lightsaber through. Blah blah blah. Then you can't feel its touch. It has no touch that you could feel. Let's be consistent. So that should have been game over. And then my last exhibit, Exhibit 6. And Exhibit 6 is that, okay, so Luke used a force projection because he had an agenda. The agenda was that he was going to walk out onto the battlefield, He was going to act pretty much as a decoy. He was going to engage the First Order. He didn't know Kylo Ren was going to come down, but he did. Better yet, I guess, in Luke's mind, he's creating what he thinks is a distraction while the rebellion kind of escaped, so to speak. So this was his agenda all along, to basically fool Kylo Ren and the First Order, fool them, deceive them that he was actually there, because they are like giddy that Luke Skywalker is actually right there. Let's destroy him. So that was his agenda, to act as a decoy, fool them, blah, blah, blah. That was his agenda there. But with Leia, that could not be his agenda. His agenda was not to fool Leia. You would not think that Luke's agenda would be to fool his sister. Because Luke Skywalker is not going to willfully deceive Leia under any circumstance. Not going to lie to her. He's not going to propagate a deception. He had no reason to try to fool her into thinking he was a Force projection. Why would he need to do that? We can understand why he was doing that with the First Order and the battlefield, all that kind of stuff. But why would he? And he went to great lengths to make him seem like he was a Force projection out there on the battlefield. But why would he do that with his sister? What agenda, what motive would he have to trick her, essentially, into thinking that he was a Force projection? There was absolutely no reason for him to trick her, and to boot, Luke would not trick his sister. That's inconsistent with Luke Skywalker. Now, some of you are going to be cynical and say, yeah, but in this movie, forget all that. Luke is not acting the way. You can't say that Luke wouldn't do this, because in this movie he's doing a lot of things that we know Luke wouldn't do. Okay, forget all that for a second. Going back to the Luke Skywalker, we know he would never willfully deceive his sister. Let's face it, this is the last moment that he has with her. He's never going to see her again, at least as mortals. Now, actually, he's not there as a mortal, but this is the last conversation that they're having as mortals. This is the last time she's going to see him in any kind of form. There's no reason for him to do it in the form of any kind of deception. He's not going to make his last interaction with her some type of deception whereby she realizes later that he died, and oh, well, he must have been a deception, and now that's her memory. Oh, he tricked me. No, he's not going to leave it that way. Luke is not going to do that. He's not going to stand there and before her like a lie, trying to deceive her, trick her, fool her, blah, blah, blah. Nothing like that. He's going to come at her very authentically, very transparent, open, lay it all out there on the line. Look, I'm sorry. It didn't work out. He probably knows he's going to die for whatever reason. Leia probably knows he's going to die for whatever reason. They've probably communicated that back and forth. She realizes this is probably going to be the last time. She realizes it's probably going to be the last time she ever sees him again. He realizes the last time he's going to see her. He's there to give his final wishes, a final message, wrap it up all in a bow, put some closure on it. Now, do you think he would do all that in the form of a deception, through some trick that only later she would find out, oh, he tricked me? That's going to be her lasting memory of a brother. That's what he wanted to do with her, appear to her, but as a trick. I don't believe that's not That's not possible. You know, say what you will about you know, Luke not being the Luke we know. Luke would not, quote unquote, Luke would not do this, Luke would not do that, and he's done a number of things that were uncharacteristic of Luke. But if you start telling me that Luke willfully perpetrated a masterful deception of his sister in the last few moments of his life, and what frankly is likely to be the last few moments of her life, if you were to tell me he perpetrated this all as a master illusion and all these touching things and frame this all around some type of grand illusion, I would say that's utterly impossible. That's utterly impossible. So, you know, to the question is, you know, why, you know, would he make it clear to her? Why do I feel that he made it clear and obvious to her that he was a forced projection, it was not real, by interacting with her, touching her, doing everything he possibly could? Why was it so important to him to convey that he was a forced projection to her? And my answer to that would be because there's no way he would let her think otherwise. That's my answer to that. So those are my exhibits, guys. Those are my argument. That's my conclusion. So to summarize, yes, I believe, I hope I've created a compelling argument for you, a presentation for you, for my conclusion that, yeah, Leia definitely knew that Luke was a forced rejection through body language, common sense, physical contact that did not occur, or apparent physical contact that did not occur, forced communication, Luke's desire to be truthful and honest on his way out. That's his nature. Has he ever lied to anybody in his whole lifetime that we've ever seen? Has he ever lied to anybody? Let alone his sister? That was his closest relationship of anybody. And he's like, no, but him and Yoda were very close. No, stop. No, stop. No, but he and his father, he tried to say, no, stop. No. I'm not going to give you that. Luke and Leia, they were close as all hell. Just stop. That's not the way he would go out. He would not go out through some type of deception with Leia. Stop. That makes no sense. Don't drag his name like that. No, he's not going to do that. All right, guys. So that's it for today's presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this content, if you like the work that I do, I invite you to subscribe and lock into this whole package. Again, thank you for watching this presentation. Again, please subscribe to help support the channel, and I will see you next time. Bye.